It took me 17 years to find the letter. It took me 17 seconds to understand that I had never been wanted. There's something you need to know about unwanted children. We don't always grow up in orphanages or foster homes. Sometimes we grow up in houses with two parents, a dog, birthday parties, and family photos on the wall. Sometimes we grow up surrounded by all the things that are supposed to mean love, while slowly suffocating on the absence of it. I found the letter in a box in the attic. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for old textbooks my older brother had used, because that's what you do when you're the youngest and everything gets passed down. Hand-me-down clothes, hand-me-down expectations, hand-me-down disappointment. The box was labeled Important Documents. Inside were birth certificates, old report cards, my brother's soccer trophies, my sister's piano recital programs, and then, folded in half, yellowed at the edges, there it was. Our Biggest Regret. The title was written in my mother's handwriting. Neat, careful, the way she always wrote. The date was from 17 years ago, 3 days after I was born. I sat on the attic floor for what felt like hours, holding that letter in my hands, unable to open it. Because some part of me already knew. Some part of me had always known. They called me ungrateful. I was just tired of pretending that survival was the same as being loved. They said I was too sensitive. In reality, I was the only one willing to feel anything real. See, when you're born into a family that already decided you were a mistake before you took your first breath, you spend your entire childhood trying to prove them wrong. You become the expert at reading rooms. You learn to make yourself smaller, quieter, less. But here's what they never tell you about being unwanted. No matter how good you are, no matter how much you achieve, no matter how perfectly you play the role they've written for you, you'll never be enough. Because the problem was never you. The problem was that they looked at you and saw everything they didn't want to see in themselves. I remember being 7 years old at my sister's piano recital. She was 12, and she was perfect. She was always perfect. After her performance, my parents stood up and clapped so hard their hands must have hurt. My father had tears in his eyes. My mother kept saying, "That's my daughter. That's my beautiful, talented daughter." They took her out for ice cream afterward. We went to that fancy place downtown where you can get any topping you want. My sister got a sundae with 3 scoops. They let her get extra whipped cream. They took pictures. They posted them online with captions about being proud. I sat in the back seat on the way home, eating the small cup of vanilla they'd gotten me without asking what I wanted. No one asked if I'd enjoyed the recital. No one asked if I wanted extra toppings. No one took my picture. I had a school art show the same month. I'd spent weeks on a painting of our house. I'd tried to make it look like one of those pictures you see in magazines. Warm light in the windows, flowers in the garden, everything perfect. I'd used every color in my paint set. I'd stayed after school to work on it. My art teacher had said it was good enough to be displayed in the main hallway. I was so excited. I'd invited my parents weeks in advance. I'd reminded them every day. I'd put the date on the kitchen calendar in red marker. My mother came. She arrived 20 minutes late, talked on her phone through half of it, and glanced at my painting for maybe 3 seconds. "That's nice, honey," she said, not really looking at it. Then she saw the mother of one of my sister's piano teachers and immediately walked over to her. I stood next to my painting for another 40 minutes, watching other kids show their parents their work, watching other parents take pictures and ask questions and actually look at what their children had created. My mother didn't come back to look at it again. When it was time to go, she was annoyed that she'd had to stay so long. My father didn't come at all. He had a work thing. There was always a work thing when it came to me. But I'd seen him leave work early for my brother's soccer games. I'd seen him cancel meetings for my sister's performances. For me, there was always something more important. I brought the painting home and hung it in my room. No one ever mentioned it again. 3 months later, when we did spring cleaning, my mother threw it away without asking. I found it in the trash, paint chipped, frame broken. "You weren't going to keep that forever, were you?" she said when I asked about it. "We don't have space to keep every little thing you kids make." But I'd seen the box in the basement full of my sister's old art projects. I'd seen the shelf in my brother's room with all his soccer trophies, even the ones from when he was 6 years old, and everyone got a trophy just for participating. Space wasn't the issue. I just wasn't worth the space. I remember being 10 years old at the dinner table. My brother had just gotten accepted into some prestigious summer program for gifted students. My parents were glowing. They opened a bottle of wine. They called the grandparents. They called my father's brother. They called my mother's best friend. They posted about it on Facebook with 3 paragraphs about how proud they were and how hard he'd worked. The dinner conversation that night lasted 2 hours. Everyone wanted to hear about the program. What would he study? Who else got in? What would this mean for his college applications? My brother sat there, basking in it, and I watched my parents look at him like he'd hung the moon. I had gotten straight A's that semester, not a single B, perfect attendance, student of the month. I'd made the honor roll. I'd won a school-wide writing competition. I'd volunteered at the library every Saturday for 3 months. I'd been saving it all up to share at dinner. I had my report card in my backpack. I had the certificate from the writing competition. I had a letter from my teacher recommending me for advanced placement classes next year. But there was no space for it. The whole dinner was about my brother. When dessert came, my mother brought out a cake she'd bought specially. It had his name on it in blue icing. Finally, when things quieted down, I pulled out my report card. "I got straight A's," I said. My father took the report card, glanced at it, and handed it back. "That's expected," he said, cutting another piece of cake. "You need to maintain that." No celebration, no phone calls, no cake, no glow, no pride in their eyes, just expectation. My mother didn't even look at the report card. She was taking pictures of my brother with his acceptance letter. I sat there with my report card in my hands, feeling stupid for thinking this would matter, feeling stupid for trying. "Can I be excused?" I asked. "Clear your plate first," my mother said, not looking up from her phone where she was posting more pictures. I went to my room and put the report card in my desk drawer. I put the writing competition certificate there too. I never showed them the letter from my teacher. What was the point? A week later, I got a B on a math quiz. Just a quiz, not even a test. 1 B out of dozens of A's. My father grounded me for 2 weeks. "You're getting sloppy," he said. "I expect better from you." But when my brother got a C on a chemistry test that same semester, my parents told him it was okay. That chemistry was hard, that he was doing his best, that they weren't disappointed. The message was clear. My brother's success deserved celebration. His failures deserved compassion. My success deserved nothing. My failures deserved punishment, because he was already golden. He was already loved. I was still trying to earn it, and I'd never earn enough. I remember being 13 years old, standing in the kitchen, trying to tell my mother about something that had happened at school. A teacher had nominated me for a leadership program. They wanted me to be a peer mentor for incoming students. They'd said I had natural empathy and maturity beyond my years. I was excited. I thought maybe this was something she'd care about, something that would make her look up from her phone. "Mom," I said, "something really cool happened today." She was scrolling through Facebook, double-tapping photos. "Mm-hmm," she said, not looking up. "My English teacher recommended me for—" "That's nice, sweetie." "Mom, are you listening?" "I heard you." Her eyes never left the screen. I stood there for a moment, watching her scroll, watching her react to other people's posts, watching her engage with the lives of strangers while ignoring the life standing 3 feet away from her. "Never mind," I said. "Okay, honey," she said, still scrolling. I went back to my room and sent an email declining the leadership program. I said I was too busy. The teacher wrote back saying she was disappointed, that she'd really thought this would be good for me. I didn't respond. What was the point of doing more things if no one cared? 5 minutes after I'd left the kitchen, my sister came home. I heard her voice from my room. "Mom, you won't believe what happened at school today." I heard my mother's phone hit the counter. "What? Tell me everything." I opened my door slightly and looked down the hallway. I could see into the kitchen. My mother had turned her whole body toward my sister. She was making eye contact. She was leaning forward. She was engaged. My sister was talking about some drama with her friends. Nothing important, nothing meaningful, just teenage gossip. But my mother hung on every word. She asked follow-up questions. She laughed at the right moments. She made sympathetic sounds when my sister described something annoying. She was present. She was interested. She was the mother I'd always wanted and never had. I closed my door and put my headphones on. I taught myself not to need her attention. I taught myself not to try. But part of me was still that 13-year-old, standing in the kitchen, trying to tell my mother something that mattered, and being met with "mm-hmm" and the glow of a phone screen. Part of me would always be standing there, invisible. I remember being 15 years old at Thanksgiving dinner. The whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. The table was full. The house was full. Everyone was loud and happy and drinking wine and eating too much. My uncle, my father's older brother, was going around the table during dessert, asking everyone about their accomplishments that year. It was his thing. Every Thanksgiving, he'd go person by person, asking what they were proud of, what they'd achieved. The adults talked about promotions and home improvements and trips they'd taken. The older cousins talked about college acceptances and internships. My brother talked about making varsity soccer. The whole table erupted in cheers. My father stood up and clapped him on the back. My uncle raised his wine glass. "To future championships," he said, and everyone drank. My sister talked about getting the lead in the school musical. More cheers, more applause. My mother's face was radiant. She launched into a 5-minute explanation of how competitive the audition was, how many people tried out, how the director had called her personally to say my sister was the most talented student they'd had in years. Everyone listened. Everyone praised. Everyone celebrated. Then it was my turn. "And what about you?" my uncle asked, smiling at me. "What are you proud of this year?" I'd been accepted into the National Honor Society. I'd maintained a 4.0 GPA for 3 years straight. I'd scored in the 99th percentile on my SATs. I'd been captain of the academic decathlon team that had won regionals. I'd volunteered at a homeless shelter every week for 8 months. I was accepted into the National Honor Society, I said. "Oh, that's nice," my uncle said, nodding politely. There was no cheer, no applause, no raised glasses. My father didn't stand up. My mother didn't explain how competitive it was. My father actually interrupted. "Your brother made varsity as a sophomore," he said, as if I'd somehow challenged that fact by mentioning my own achievement. "That's actually impressive. Most kids don't make varsity until they're juniors or seniors." The table went quiet for a moment. A few people looked uncomfortable. My grandmother looked like she might say something, but she didn't. Then my uncle laughed. One of those awkward laughs people do when they're trying to move past something uncomfortable. "Well, sounds like everyone's doing great," he said, and moved on to ask my cousin about her year. I looked down at my plate. At the slice of pumpkin pie I'd been excited to eat. My appetite was gone. I realized something in that moment. My accomplishments weren't just unimpressive to my family. They were somehow threatening. They somehow took away from my siblings' shine. So they had to be diminished, minimized, redirected, because there wasn't enough praise to go around. There wasn't enough pride. There wasn't enough love. And I was the one who didn't get a share. After dinner, I was in the kitchen helping clean up. My grandmother came in and put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm very proud of you," she said quietly. "Your achievements matter." I almost started crying right there, because it was the first time anyone in my family had said anything like that to me. "Thank you," I whispered. She squeezed my shoulder and left. I never forgot that moment. The way it felt to have someone, anyone, acknowledge that what I did mattered. But I also never forgot that it took my grandmother, who saw me maybe 3 times a year, to do what my parents never had. To simply say, "I'm proud of you." These weren't dramatic moments. There was no screaming, no violence, no obvious cruelty. Just glances that slid past me. Silences where my name should have been. Jokes that always seemed to land on me a little harder than everyone else. Comparisons that made it clear where I ranked. Every family photo where I stood slightly to the side. Every holiday where my gifts were a little less thoughtful. Every birthday where the cake was the flavor someone else liked. Small things, tiny things, but they all pointed in the same direction. Away from me. I learned a term last year in my psychology class, scapegoat. The teacher was talking about family systems, about how dysfunction requires someone to carry it. How every family that can't face its own problems needs someone to blame. Someone to absorb all the tension, all the unspoken resentment, all the things no one wants to acknowledge. I sat in that classroom and felt my chest tighten. Because finally, after 17 years, someone was giving it a name. Every family needs someone to carry what no one wants to admit. My parents had a perfect marriage. On paper. They smiled in photos. They held hands at church. They never fought in front of people. But I could feel it. The coldness between them when no one was watching. The way they used us as buffers. The way they poured all their attention into my siblings and left me with the scraps. Because looking at me reminded them of something. I don't know what exactly. Maybe the fact that I was unplanned. Maybe the fact that I came at a difficult time in their marriage. Maybe I looked too much like my father's side of the family, and my mother held some old resentment about that. I'll never know for sure. But what I do know is this. I wasn't just the youngest child. I was the release valve. The one they could be impatient with. The one they could ignore. The one who absorbed all the disappointment they felt about their own lives. When something went wrong, it was somehow my fault. When someone was in a bad mood, I was the one who caught it. When they needed to feel like good parents, they focused on my siblings and their achievements. When they needed to feel like they were doing their best despite impossible circumstances, they pointed to me as evidence of how hard it was. I was the proof that they were trying, and the proof that trying wasn't always enough. I was the acceptable casualty. The night everything changed wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday. My mother was hosting her book club. My father was watching TV. My siblings were out with friends. I was in my room, doing homework, trying to be invisible like always. My mother called me downstairs. "Can you help me set up?" she asked. But it wasn't really a question. I came down and started arranging chairs, putting out snacks, doing what I was told. One of her book club friends arrived early. Mrs. Patterson from down the street. "Oh, you're so lucky," she said to my mother, watching me work. "Having such a helpful son. My kids never lift a finger." My mother laughed. It was her performance laugh, the one she used in public. "Well, we've really tried to raise them right," she said. "All three of them. We believe in holding our children to high standards." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a big snap. It wasn't loud or violent or even particularly dramatic. It was quiet. "All three of us?" I heard myself say. My mother looked at me. Her smile froze. "Excuse me? You said all three of us. You hold all three of us to high standards." "That's what I said. Yes." Her voice had an edge now. A warning. I should have stopped. I should have swallowed it down like I always did. I should have played my role. But I was tired. "That's interesting," I said. "Because when Michael got a B in chemistry, you told him it was okay, that he was doing his best. When I got a B in anything, you grounded me for 2 weeks." The room went very quiet. Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable. She mumbled something about needing to get something from her car and left. My mother waited until the door closed. "Go to your room," she said. Her voice was cold, controlled. "I'm just saying what's true." I said, "Go to your room." I went. But something had changed. I'd said it out loud. I'd named the thing we all pretended didn't exist. And families like mine don't forgive that. You can be difficult. You can be moody. You can be disappointing. But you cannot be honest. Because honesty reveals the whole system. It exposes the lie everyone has agreed to live with. The lie that everything is fine. The lie that everyone is loved equally. The lie that it's all in your head. The next morning, my father barely looked at me. My mother spoke to me only when necessary, in short, clipped sentences. When my siblings came home and asked what happened, they'd already been told some version where I'd been disrespectful and embarrassed our mother in front of her friends. I'd done something unforgivable. I'd refused to pretend. The punishment wasn't grounding. It wasn't yelling. It wasn't anything you could point to and say, "This is wrong." It was silence. It was coldness. It was a wall that went up between me and everyone else. My father stopped asking me about school. Not that he asked much before, but now he didn't ask at all. He'd come home from work, and before, he'd at least go through the motions. How was school? Even if he didn't listen to the answer. Now he'd walk right past me. He'd talk to my brother about soccer practice, talk to my sister about her college applications, and then just stop, as if I wasn't there. I'd try to join the conversation. I had a really interesting discussion in history class today. My father would look at his phone. "Michael, did you talk to Coach about playing time?" He'd ask my brother, completely cutting me off. It happened so smoothly that if you weren't paying attention, you might not even notice. But I noticed, every time. My mother started having family meetings about college planning. She'd sit down with my brother and sister, spread out brochures and applications on the dining room table, talk about SAT prep and campus visits and financial aid. They'd do this in the living room, in the evening, while I was home, while I was in my room, literally 20 feet away. They didn't close the door. They didn't try to hide it. They just didn't invite me. The first time it happened, I walked out to ask if I should join, since I was only a year behind my sister. "You're only a junior," my mother said, not looking up from the brochures. "We'll deal with you later." "But shouldn't I start?" "We're busy right now," she said. Her voice had that edge, that warning. I went back to my room. Later never came. They never had a college planning meeting for me. When I asked my mother about visiting colleges, she said, "You can look them up online." When I asked about SAT prep, she said, "There are free resources on the internet." My siblings got tutors, got campus tours, got parents who helped them craft essays and research scholarships. I got Google. My sister, who used to at least acknowledge my existence, started treating me like I was radioactive. If I walked into a room where she was hanging out with friends, the conversation would stop. Not pause, stop. They'd all look at me, wait for me to leave. Once, I needed to get something from the kitchen, and she was in there with two of her friends. I walked in, said, "Excuse me," reached past them to get a glass of water. As I was leaving, I heard her whisper to her friend, "Just ignore him. He's been causing drama." Her friend whispered back, "What did he do?" "He's just being difficult lately, making everything about him." I stood in the hallway, holding my glass of water, listening to my sister rewrite history, making everything about me. I'd been trying to disappear. I'd been trying to take up less space. I'd been trying to stay out of everyone's way. But somehow, that was making everything about me. My brother was more direct. He cornered me one day after school, in the driveway, before I could get in the house. "Whatever you're doing, stop it," he said. His face was hard, angry. "I haven't done anything," I said. "That's the problem. You think you're better than everyone. You think you see something we don't. You think you're so much smarter, so much more aware. But you're just making things harder for all of us." I just asked a question. "You embarrassed Mom. You made her look bad in front of her friends. And now, all of us have to deal with her mood because of you. She's been stressed for weeks. Dad's been stressed. Do you know how much harder that makes everything for the rest of us?" I stared at him. At my older brother, who'd always been the golden child, who'd always been protected, who'd always been loved without having to earn it. "I told the truth," I said quietly. "I just said what was true." "No one cares about your truth," he said. "We care about keeping this family functional. And you're making that impossible." That's when I understood. It wasn't about truth. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about love or honesty or doing the right thing. It was about maintaining the picture of the perfect family, the picture everyone wanted to believe in, the picture that required me to smile in photos and pretend everything was fine and never ever say that I could feel the difference in how I was treated. Because if I said it, the picture broke. And I was the crack in the frame. Family dinners became excruciating. Everyone talked around me. Not to me, not about me, just around me. As if I were a piece of furniture. A chair no one wanted to sit in but had to keep because it came with the set. I'd try to join conversations. "Did you guys see that thing about—" "Michael, tell Dad about your game on Saturday," my mother would interrupt. I'd try to share something from my day. "Something crazy happened in chemistry." "Oh, that reminds me," my sister would talk over me. "I need to get new sheet music for my recital." I'd try to make a joke. Crickets. Literal silence. No one laughed. No one even acknowledged I'd spoken. But when my siblings spoke, everyone listened. Everyone laughed. Everyone engaged. Everyone was present. My sister could talk about the most mundane aspects of her day. What she ate for lunch, what someone wore to school, some meaningless gossip. And my parents would hang on every word. My brother could grunt out two-word answers to questions and receive praise for opening up. I could share something meaningful, something I'd been thinking about, something I'd accomplished, and be met with glassy eyes and topic changes. I was there, but not there. Present, but excluded. Seen, but unseen. It's a special kind of torture, being invisible in a room full of people who are supposed to love you, people who can see you, people who choose not to. I started eating dinner in my room. The first night I did it, I waited for someone to come get me, to ask why I wasn't at the table, to care. No one came. The second night, I heard my mother tell my father, "He's eating in his room again." "Let him," my father said. "If he wants to isolate himself, that's his choice." His choice. As if I'd created this situation. As if I'd built the walls. I started spending more time away from home. At the library, where I'd stay until closing. At coffee shops, where I'd nurse a single drink for hours while doing homework. At parks, even when it was cold, because anywhere felt warmer than that house. No one noticed when I left. No one asked where I was going. One time, I didn't come home until 11 p.m. on a school night. I was 16. I'd been at a friend's house, but my parents didn't know that. I hadn't told them. I just left after dinner and stayed out. When I came home, my parents were watching TV. "You're back," my mother said, not looking up. That was it. No, "Where were you?" No, "We were worried." No, "You should have called." Just, "You're back." If either of my siblings had stayed out past their curfew without permission, there would have been consequences. Questions. Concern. For me, there was relief that I'd been gone. The house began to feel like a place where I was tolerated, but not welcomed. Like I was a guest who'd overstayed. Like every breath I took used up air that belonged to someone else. Like every space I occupied was space that should have gone to someone more deserving. I'd walk down the hallway and feel like I was trespassing. I'd sit in the living room and feel like I was intruding. I'd exist in my own home and feel like I was doing something wrong just by being there. And the worst part? There was no one specific thing I could point to. No dramatic confrontation. No clear abuse. No obvious cruelty. Just the slow, steady withdrawal of warmth. Just the gradual removal of inclusion. Just the quiet replacement of acknowledgement with absence. Just the feeling of being erased while still being seen. Of being present while being treated as absent. Of being alive while being treated as a ghost. I found the letter 3 weeks after the book club incident. I'd gone up to the attic looking for those textbooks, and there it was. Our biggest regret. I opened it with shaking hands. The letter was written to no one in particular, or maybe to each other. It was in my mother's handwriting, but it said "we" throughout. We thought we were done. We thought 2 was enough. We were finally getting our lives back. The kids were getting older, more independent. We could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And then this happened. We're trying to see it as a blessing. Everyone says it's a blessing. But right now, all we feel is exhausted, overwhelmed, trapped again. We love our children. We do. But this wasn't the plan. This wasn't what we wanted. We'd finally started to remember who we were outside of being parents. We'd started talking about what we'd do when the kids were grown. Travel. Hobbies. Just us again. Now we're back to square one. Diapers and sleepless nights and years. Years before we can have our lives back. We know we'll love this baby. We know we'll do our best. But right now, we can't help feeling like this is our biggest regret. Not the child itself. Never the child. but the timing. The loss of freedom. The feeling of being trapped just when we thought we were getting free. Maybe someday we'll look back and be glad this happened. Maybe this child will bring something unexpected and beautiful into our lives. But right now, all we feel is resentment. I read it 3 times. I sat on that attic floor and read the words over and over until they blurred. And then something happened. Something clicked into place. The clarity didn't feel like victory. It felt like grief, because I finally understood. It was never about me being difficult or ungrateful or too sensitive. It was never about me not trying hard enough or achieving enough or being enough. I was born into a role I could never escape. I was the reminder of loss, the symbol of trapped freedom, the evidence of a plan that went wrong. They'd spent 17 years trying to love me despite resenting me. And I'd spent 17 years trying to earn something that was never actually available. Love, in my family, was conditional. Acceptance required self-betrayal. Belonging had a price I couldn't afford to pay. No matter how perfect I was, no matter how quiet, no matter how helpful or successful or invisible, I would always be the regret. I would always be the reminder of what they lost. I wasn't a person to them. I was a problem that never got solved. That's when I understood. Not that I needed to fight harder, or be better, or prove something, but that the game was rigged from the start. You can't win at a game where the rules are designed for you to lose. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes after you stop trying, after you stop performing, after you stop hoping, after you finally accept that the love you've been chasing was never real to begin with. It's not the loneliness of being alone. It's the loneliness of being surrounded by people who were supposed to know you and choosing to be unknown instead. It's the loneliness of sitting at a breakfast table with your family and feeling more isolated than you would sitting by yourself in an empty room. It's the loneliness of hearing laughter from the living room and knowing that if you walked in, it would stop. It's the loneliness of passing your mother in the hallway and having her look through you as if you're made of glass. It's the loneliness of realizing that your absence doesn't create a hole in anyone's day. I stopped trying to join family dinners. I stopped trying to share my day. I stopped trying to get my parents' approval or my siblings' acceptance. I just stopped. And you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing changed. No one came to my room to ask if I was okay. No one knocked on my door to say they missed me at dinner. No one noticed that I'd essentially moved out emotionally while still living in the house. The family continued exactly as it had. Maybe even better. Maybe smoother without me there to remind them of their own cruelty. Without me there to be the evidence of their failure. I went through my days like a ghost. Wake up, shower, get dressed, avoid eye contact in the kitchen, grab something quick for breakfast, leave for school early so I didn't have to sit in the car with my siblings, stay late at school for extra credit, for clubs, for any reason not to go home, come home after dinner, go straight to my room, do homework, sleep, repeat. My grades stayed perfect. Better than perfect, actually. I threw myself into school because it was the only place where achievement was still recognized, where effort still mattered, where I could still be seen as valuable. I got a 4.0 every semester. I took every AP class offered. I joined academic decathlon and became captain. I volunteered everywhere I could. I built a resume that would get me into any college I wanted. But I did it all alone. I went to school, came home, did my homework, applied to colleges, kept my room clean, did my chores without being asked. I was the model of a good son on paper. But I was gone. I'd left the family emotionally before they ever had to officially let me go. and the silence in my room became my only friend. The space between me and them became my only comfort. Because at least in that space, I wasn't pretending. At least in that space, I wasn't performing a version of myself that no one appreciated anyway. At least in that space, I wasn't carrying the weight of trying to be enough for people who'd decided I wasn't before I could even speak. But God, it was lonely. There were nights when I'd lie in bed and hear my family watching a movie together downstairs, hearing them laugh at jokes, hearing them talk during the boring parts, hearing my father make his terrible commentary that everyone else found hilarious, hearing my mother make popcorn in the kitchen, the smell drifting up to my room. No one had invited me. No one had asked if I wanted to join. They just started the movie. Without me. And the worst part was knowing that if I went downstairs, if I tried to join, the energy would shift. The ease would evaporate. I'd sit on the couch and feel everyone slightly readjust themselves away from me. I'd laugh at a joke and get polite smiles instead of real ones. I'd make a comment and be met with silence. So I stayed in my room. I put on headphones and listened to music, and tried not to think about what it meant that my own family had movie nights without me. There were Sunday mornings when I'd wake up to the smell of my mother's famous pancakes. She'd make them for the family on special occasions, birthday mornings, holiday mornings, first day of summer mornings. I'd come downstairs and find my siblings at the table, plates full of pancakes, my parents serving and laughing and asking about their plans for the day. There'd be pancakes left, technically, but they were the burned ones, the misshapen ones, the ones my mother had made first while the pan was still warming up. Those were mine. No one said it explicitly, but it was understood. The good pancakes, the fluffy, golden, perfect ones, those were for my brother and sister. I'd take my burned pancakes back to my room and eat them alone. There were moments when I'd walk past my father's office and hear him on the phone with someone bragging about his kids. I'd stop and listen, even though I knew I shouldn't. "Michael made varsity," he'd say, pride obvious in his voice. "As a sophomore. Can you believe it? Kid's got real talent." Or, "Sarah's got the lead in the school musical. The director said she's the best student they've had in years." He'd talk about them for 10, 15 minutes, sharing their achievements like they were his own, glowing with pride. Never once did I hear my name. I'd gotten a perfect score on the SAT, 1,600, top 1% in the country. He'd never mentioned it to anyone, not once. I'd won a regional writing competition that included students from 12 different schools. Silence. I'd been accepted to volunteer at a prestigious summer program at a nearby university. Something only 20 students in the state got to do. Nothing. It's one thing to be alone because you don't have people. It's another thing to be alone because you have people who don't actually see you. The loneliness of that, of living with people who share your name and your house but not your life, that kind of loneliness is a special kind of painful, because you can't even grieve it properly. You can't call it what it is, because to everyone outside your family, you have a family. You have parents. You have siblings. You're not alone. But inside that house, you're the loneliest person in the world. I started making elaborate plans for after graduation. Colleges across the country, scholarships that would cover everything so I wouldn't have to rely on them financially. Jobs lined up for summers so I'd have an excuse not to come home. I built an escape plan like other kids built dream boards. Every acceptance letter I got from a college far away felt like a small victory, like a countdown to freedom. My mother asked me once why I was only applying to schools across the country. "Don't you want to stay close to family?" she asked, not looking up from her book. The question was so absurd, I almost laughed out loud. Close to family. As if we were close now. As if there was something here worth staying for. I think it's good to have independence, I said carefully. Neutrally. The way I'd learned to speak around her. She nodded and went back to her book. She didn't push. She didn't seem disappointed. She didn't try to convince me to stay. If anything, she seemed relieved. And that moment of realizing that my own mother was relieved at the thought of me being across the country, that loneliness was exquisite in its pain. It was the loneliness of finally seeing clearly. The loneliness of understanding that I wasn't just unliked. I was unwanted. The loneliness of knowing that some gaps can never be bridged. The loneliness of growing up in a house full of people and still having to raise yourself. The loneliness of learning that family is supposed to mean love and belonging, but for you, it only meant biology and obligation. The house felt haunted, but not by ghosts, by the ghost of what should have been, by the absence of what I'd needed and never got, by the phantom of a childhood where I felt wanted. I'd walk through rooms that should have been filled with memories of love and connection, and only feel the echo of emptiness. This wasn't the loneliness of a sad childhood. This was the loneliness of a stolen one. The loneliness of knowing that other kids like my siblings, got to experience what family was supposed to feel like. And I got this. I got the performance, the facade, the obligation without the love. I got the title of son without any of the substance. And the loneliness of that, of being a son to people who never wanted to be your parents, that's a loneliness that doesn't have a name. It's just a hollow space where warmth should have been. It's just a silence where laughter should have echoed. It's just a cold dinner alone in your room when pancakes are being shared downstairs. It's just the sound of a movie starting without you. It's just the absence of your name in conversations about pride. It's just the knowledge that when you finally leave, no one will really miss you. They might miss the idea of you, the role you played, the way having 3 kids looks on paper. But you? They won't miss you. I don't hate my parents. That's what people think when you tell them stories like this. They think you must hate them. They think it's about blame or anger or revenge. But it's not. It's about understanding. Some families don't want children. They want accessories. They want proof that they did the right thing. Evidence that they're good people. Living, breathing trophies that reflect well on them. They want children who fulfill their vision, who complete their picture, who make them look good at parties and on Christmas cards and in conversations with neighbors. They don't want actual human beings with needs and feelings and their own interior worlds. They want props. And when a child doesn't fit the role, when a child is unplanned or unexpected or different from what they imagined, that child becomes a problem to manage, not a person to love. My parents did their duty. They fed me, clothed me, kept a roof over my head, sent me to school, took me to the doctor. They did everything you're supposed to do, except actually see me, except actually want me, except actually love me for who I was instead of resenting me for who I wasn't. And here's the thing I've learned. You can do everything right on paper and still fail at the only thing that matters. You can provide every physical need and still starve a child emotionally. You can be present and still be absent. You can call it love and still make someone feel like a burden. The letter in the attic didn't tell me anything I didn't already know on some level. It just confirmed it. It gave me permission to stop pretending. It gave me permission to stop trying to fix something that was broken before I arrived. I've spent 17 years trying to be the child they wanted. I've spent 17 years trying to earn a place in a family that never made room for me. I've spent 17 years believing that if I could just be better, quieter, more accomplished, less troublesome, more perfect, then finally, they'd look at me the way they looked at my siblings. But some families don't want you to get better. They need you to be the problem. Because if you're not the problem, then they have to look at themselves. And that's too painful. So they keep you in that role. They keep you small. They keep you wrong. Because it's easier than admitting that maybe the dysfunction isn't coming from the youngest child. Maybe it's coming from two people who had a child they didn't want and never quite forgave him for existing. I still live in that house. I still see them every day. But I'm not there anymore. Not really. I'm building something else. Something they can't touch. A version of myself that doesn't need their approval, or their acceptance, or their love. A version that knows the truth. I graduate in 6 months. I'll move across the country for college. I'll build a life they won't understand. I'll become someone they never imagined. Not because I'm rebelling, not because I'm angry, but because I finally understand that I don't have to keep trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. Sometimes the problem isn't that you're difficult. Sometimes the problem is that you're real in a family that only knows how to love performances. Sometimes the problem isn't that you're too sensitive. Sometimes the problem is that you're the only one willing to feel the truth. Sometimes the problem isn't you at all. I found a letter that confirmed what I'd always known, but I didn't need the letter to tell me the truth. I'd been living it my entire life. The only difference now is that I've stopped trying to change it. I've stopped trying to fix what was broken before I was even born. I've stopped carrying what was never mine to carry. And maybe that makes me the black sheep. Maybe that makes me the difficult one. Maybe that makes me the mistake they always thought I was. But at least now I know. The mistake was never me. What if the problem had never been you?